Welcome back to Geopolitics, the Long Game, Power, Money, and the World They Do Not Want You to Know, Season 1, Episode 4. Every 4 or 5 years, you vote. The government changes. However, the policies stay the same. That is not a coincidence. It is the design. Beneath every elected government sits a permanent layer, officials, institutions, and financial interests, whose careers span decades and whose policy commitments survive every election. They are not accountable to you. They do not leave when the administration changes. And they have been running the long game since before you were born. By the end of this episode, you'll be able to identify them by name, by institution, and by the specific mechanisms they use to ensure that the position never changes, regardless of who you vote for. I'm Richard. This is The Long Game. The term deep state entered mainstream political vocabulary only recently, but the phenomenon itself was identified and documented long before the phrase existed. Carroll Quigley, a Georgetown historian whose works forms the spine of this series, described it in 1966 in his book Tragedy and Hope as a network of power that operates behind the facade of democratic politics. He was not describing a secret cabal. He was describing something more ordinary and more durable, the overlap between permanent institutional structures, the military, the intelligence services, the foreign policy apparatus, the financial regulatory system, and the private interests those structures serve. The key word is permanent. Elected governments are temporary. The institutions they normally govern are not. Senior officials of the intelligence community, the various state departments or ministries, the financial services, their careers span multiple administrations, multiple parties, multiple stated ideological directions. They know where their bodies are buried. They control the information flow to incoming political leadership. Ray McGovern, who briefed 4 presidents as a senior CIA analyst, describes it as the 7 Ds. Senior officials who disagree with the incoming administration have 7 options: dissent, deter, delay, dilute, deceive, divert, or wait for the departure of whoever is causing the disruption. Most administrations encounter at least 4 of the 7 within their first year. Now, this is not conspiracy. This is institutional gravity. To understand why the permanent players carried such positional weight, we need to understand where they were formed. Quigley taught at Georgetown, Harvard, and Princeton. He had access to the records of the organizations he was studying, access that was subsequently withdrawn, which tells you something about how uncomfortable his findings made those whose networks he was describing. What he documented was the deliberate construction, beginning in the late 19th century at Oxford University and the Slade Endowment with John Ruskin, of an Anglo-American network of influence. Initially, it was centered on the Round Table groups founded by Cecil Rhodes and Alfred Milner in Britain, and extended through the Council of Foreign Relations in the United States and Chatham House in Britain. The network's purpose was the maintenance of Anglo-American imperial dominance through the management of international finance, the control of key political appointments, and the cultivation of a shared elite culture that transcended national borders. In his words, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. The institutions Quigley identified are still operating. The CFR still produces the foreign policy consensus that dominates both American political parties. The permanent players were formed in the late 19th century. They have been at the board ever since. But Quigley's most important observation is not about the institutions themselves. It is about what sits above them. The CFR, Chatham House, the foundations. These are not the apex. They are the transmission mechanism. Above them sits the financial interest that funds them, directs them, and benefits from the policy consensus they produce. The City of London, the major American banking houses, the dynastic families whose names appear on the foundations, but rarely in the policy documents. The permanent players serve the permanent money. That relationship between institutional power and the financial interests that cultivate it is the subject of Season 3 of this series. What do the permanent players actually look like when they move? Two case studies. First, the Wolfowitz Doctrine. In 1992, Paul Wolfowitz was Under-Secretary of Defense for Policy under George H.W. Bush. In February 1992, his office produced a classified defense planning guidance document. Its central argument that the United States had emerged as the world's sole superpower, and American policy must be permanently oriented towards preventing any rival from ever reaching a comparable position. The document was leaked to the New York Times. The public reaction was sufficiently negative that the Bush administration formally disavowed it. But the underlying policy framework did not disappear. It was embedded in the institutional memory of the Pentagon's planning apparatus. When the neoconservative network returned to government under George W. Bush, the Wolfowitz Doctrine re-emerged as the explicit strategic framework for the post-9/11 order. Disavowed by one administration, implemented by the next. The permanent players stored the positional advantage and deployed it when conditions were right. Secondly, NATO expansion. In 1990, American and German officials gave verbal assurances to Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev that NATO would not expand eastward. Between 1999 and 2020, NATO expanded from 16 members to 30 across multiple American administrations with different stated foreign policy priorities. No president reversed it. The institutional momentum proved effectively immune to electoral variation. The political leadership changed. The position did not. The Trump presidency provided the most publicly visible collision between an incoming administration and the permanent players in modern American history. Trump came to office with stated intentions that directly contradicted several core commitments of the permanent foreign policy apparatus. Improve relations with Russia, reduce NATO commitments, exit the Middle East, and end the Iran sanctions regime. Whether these were good ideas is a separate question. What happened to them mechanically is the subject. The Russiagate investigation absorbed the first 2 years of the administration's bandwidth, made any improvement with US-Russia relations politically toxic, and was driven by a coalition of intelligence community leakers and media institutions with structural reasons to resist the policy change. Ray McGovern comments that the assessment that Russia interfered in the 2016 election to help Trump was produced by a hand-picked group of analysts under Director Brennan, not by the full intelligence community. Syria. Trump announced withdrawal of US forces in December 2018. The announcement produced immediate resistance. The resignation of Defense Secretary Mattis, leaks to the press, congressional pressure, and a subsequent reversal that left a residual force in place regardless of the presidential announcement. The question is not whether any particular policy the permanent players resist is good or bad. The question is whether a democracy can function when the permanent bureaucracy retains an effective veto over elected policy. That question remains open. In February 1992, the Pentagon produces a classified defense planning guidance document under Paul Wolfowitz. Its core argument is that American primacy must be maintained permanently by preventing any rival power from ever reaching a comparable position. The document is leaked. The Bush administration disavows it publicly. The Wolfowitz Doctrine does not disappear. It is stored in the institutional memory of the Pentagon's planning apparatus. When the same network returns to government 10 years later, it re-emerges, not as a controversial proposal, but as established policy, implemented through the authorization for use of military force and the invasion of Iraq. The document is publicly available. The National Security Archive holds the original leaked version. The notation of the permanent player's positional storage is in the public record. Now, Episode 5 will discuss intelligence as a geopolitical weapon, the covert operational arm that translates the permanent player's strategy into action in foreign capitals. The intelligence service's role in Iran in 1953, in Chile in 1973, and in the hidden moves that Season 1 has been mapping from the beginning. Should you find this episode intriguing, then please share, subscribe, and like, as this will help more people find these podcasts that I hope helps explain some of the news we see today. I am Richard. This is The Long Game, Power, Money, and the World They Don't Want You to See. The permanent players have been identified. Next week, their instruments.